Hello my friends. I wanted to show you this raspberry method of growing. So let's get to it. This I've had a row or 1 and 2 rows here of raspberries a few years ago, and they were getting out pretty. They were like 3-foot rows, and then because raspberries grow kind of all over the place, and it's a shallow root plant shrub, and it's very shallow, spreading roots maybe 3 maybe 6 inches deep, no more than that. It kind of grows, all new shoots come up around the plant from the roots and so on. And what I had was I had all this material everywhere else but around the raspberries, because you really can't cover them, and there were so many weeds and grass plants that were growing in them. It was just extremely grown in, couldn't really weed them, and they just didn't become enjoyable at all. And then what was happening, they were climbing up in through the grapes. The roots were traveling out and under and coming up everywhere except from these areas, because they're so covered up in grass. And what was happening also, the seeds from all the weeds and grass, they were seeding out into the rest of the plants here, wherever they can grow. And it was a constant maintenance issue. So I had a bunch of these chimney pipes from a project. They were just sitting, and I figured I'm gonna try to plant in them this way. They're 24 inches deep, and I put them up in here and filled them up mostly with compost and planted raspberries, and they just didn't want to grow. They grew short like this, and they looked like they were just stunned, weren't growing too quickly at all. So I I'm thinking, everybody else also told me they're not going to grow because there's not enough area for the raspberries. And it's very possible. I'm going to give it one more year to see how they do, because they are starting to grow. The other side, they kind of pruned up a little bit, but this is how they grew out last year. New shoots came up, and they actually produced fruit. Raspberries, not too large, so I'm actually trying to this year cut them down shorter like this. Even though this is last year's new growth, gonna cut it down to get a little more vigor on these canes here, get new ones to come up, and any buds that are left around these on the bottom will shoot up. Me cutting them, when I cut them down like this, it's green. They're alive, they're not dead. So the raspberries, you do need to prune them down pretty low, and cause new growth to come out. These ones I'm cutting down kind of where I'm cutting them, because I'm planning to also mulch them, and then get some new growth coming up. Here's this one. It's gonna shoot out new shoots and produce raspberries, but I also wanted to produce canes. There's some new growth coming up. I'm gonna cut it down lower. I'm cutting everything down lower this year, and see how that does. But in general, what you do is you find the last year's growth, and you cut it out. And anything new, like this, grew last year, and it produced fruit on it at the tip towards the end of the growing season. And then the rest of this has new buds right here. So these are all new buds, which will produce branches with fruit on them this year. So some of them I'll actually leave. I'll cut it down to a good solid bud right there, and have it branch out and grow some fruit on it. And some of them I'll just cut back cut back low and get some new canes coming up this year. But the way you prune it though, you cut out all the old canes, last year's, the years before, and anything that grew last year that didn't fruit will fruit this year very well. Depends on varieties. They some produce fruit multiple times in the season as they grow, and then you end up with canes like this. So this is last year's growth, and it has fruit on it. So it grew out last year and fruited. So this year will also fruit from these buds right here. See, they're already actually coming out. See the buds breaking? It's green right there. So the growth has already started. So I can cut it, right above the bud, and it'll grow new branches which they'll fruit on. Some of these scragglier ones, I'll cut them back lower to get some new shoots growing. So here's last year's growth. Let's see, so I'll just cut it down to some basically fresher buds. This one's kind of growing some buds right here, starting to swell up. This one's already, like I said, opening up. So we'll let this grow, and then anything smaller like this, I'm just gonna cut back to get new growth. So I'm kind of second guessing right now if it was the fresh compost, horse manure, was all mixed in there that was causing it to not grow as well. But I mean, just looking at last year, it grew a bunch of new shoots. They didn't grow tall, but they grew and produced fruit. So I want to just give them a second chance this year and observe, kind of just test things out. You can't just always take people's word for it, not even mine. I'm no means a specialist or anything. I'm just experimenting with everything and observing and letting you know how it does. But the idea is to cut out anything that's more than 2 years old, and top off anything that has fruit on it. So if this is last year's growth with fruit, you just cut that off to the nearest bud. See, this one is opening up already, so I'm gonna cut it right there, and you leave this growing. Most of the time they're much taller. They're like, they'll be at 4 or 5 feet tall, and then you will have those, we'll have with some fruit on top of it, and you cut that off. But due to whatever circumstances I have, the lack of space for roots, they're kind of dwarfed. So I'm going to trim mine like this and see how it goes. Basically cutting out everything in here that's short and scraggly or dead. Like dead ones, you want to cut out as far as you can. Get in there, chop it off, because it's just gonna produce or give a place for disease to grow or bugs to get in if you leave it too dead wood in there too high. So just cut it all out. There's new growth I can see there. There's some leaves coming up. There's this one, let's see, dry. We'll cut this off all the way at the bottom. I'll go through and pull everything out in a little bit. I just can't do it with the camera there. This one has buds that are kind of opening up. I'm gonna cut it to here. And this one is drying up, and it's drying up. But the one next to it, out of the same place, is green. So cut anything out that's dry, kind of like this. So I left these 2 canes. They were green and they're starting to kind of bud out right here. So they'll stay, and then the rest of it I trimmed back. There's a bud right there, so this will cause a new shoot to grow. But typically you cut them down pretty low if you have nice healthy canes going out. and they'll grow well. They'll start sending out new growth from the roots and from the really down low base of the old cane you cut off. So that's the idea on the raspberries. I wish I had some, more healthier ones that I could show you on, but that's the idea. Thank you. Take care. Bye.